The train had departed, taking the life of the city with it. The noise was gone. The ambition was gone. But Rhyolite was not entirely empty. In the vast, encroaching silence, a few hearts still beat. Tonight, we sit with the last guardians, the men who watched the lights go out one by one, and who learned to find comfort in the kingdom of dust. The year was 1914. 4 years had passed since the Great Exodus. The town of Rhyolite, which once boasted of being the metropolis of the southern desert, was now a carcass picked clean by the vultures of salvage. The streets were no longer defined by traffic, but by the encroachment of sagebrush. The wooden sidewalks, once trodden by boots of Italian leather, were warping and splintering under the relentless sun. But if you looked closely at the sprawling ruins at twilight, you would see something strange. Amidst the hundreds of dark, hollowed-out buildings, there were 3 or 4 pinpricks of yellow light. These were the kerosene lamps of the last residents. Elias Thorne was gone. The bankers were gone. But Tom Kelly remained, and he was not entirely alone. There was a man named Old Man Lorraine, a French-Canadian prospector who refused to believe the gold was gone. And there was Mr. Sims, the former postmaster, who stayed because he simply had nowhere else to go. They were the caretakers of a cemetery that hadn't yet been buried. Life in the ruins was a study in minimalism. There was no electricity. The power lines had been cut years ago. There was no ice delivery. Water had to be hauled carefully. The world had shrunk from a global economy back to a primitive survival. Tom Kelly sat on the porch of his bottle house. He was older now. The desert sun had turned his skin into something resembling cured leather. His beard was white as the salt flats. He wasn't waiting for a train anymore. He was listening to the wind. In the city, wind is a nuisance. In a ghost town, wind is a voice. It whistled through the empty vault of the Cook Bank. It rattled the loose tin sheets on the roof of the Overbury building. It sang a mournful song through the necks of the 50,000 bottles that made up Kelly's walls.
Every Sunday, the 3 men would meet. It was a ritual born of necessity. Humans can survive without water for 3 days, but they cannot survive without conversation for much longer. They met at the ruins of the Southern Hotel. The bar was gone, stripped for firewood, but there was a sturdy table left in the lobby. Lorraine would bring a bottle of questionable moonshine he distilled himself from cactus and sugar. Sims would bring a deck of cards that was so worn the markings were barely visible. "The bank roof caved in yesterday," Sims remarked, shuffling the cards. His voice was raspy, unused to speaking. "Gravity," Kelly nodded, lighting his pipe. "The bank was too heavy. It tried to fight the earth. The earth always wins." "I saw a coyote in the schoolhouse," Lorraine added, pouring the drink into tin cups. "He was sleeping near the chalkboard. Looked like a good student." They laughed. It was a dry, rasping laughter. They spoke of the town as if it were a living beast that was slowly dying. They tracked its decay like a doctor tracks a fever. They knew which wall fell last week. They knew which window was broken by the storm. They were the historians of the rot.
"Do you think they'll come back?" Sims asked, pausing with a card in midair. He asked this every week. It was his prayer. Lorraine spat on the floor. "The gold is gone, you old fool. Men follow the gold like flies follow a carcass. There is no meat left on this bone." "They might come for the air," Kelly said softly. "The air is still good. The silence is good." "You can't eat silence, Tom," Sims sighed, playing his card. The game continued. Outside, the wind picked up, blowing a tumbleweed down the center of Golden Street.
scratching along the pavement where the automobiles used to race.
The death of the Iron Horse. The year 1916 brought the final severance. Kelly heard the noise early in the morning. It wasn't the chuff-chuff of a steam engine. It was the clanking of metal on metal. He walked out to the depot. A work crew was there, but they weren't loading passengers. They were ripping up the tracks. The Great War was raging in Europe. The world needed steel for cannons, for ships, for bullets. The rails of the Las Vegas and Tonopah line were worth more as scrap metal than they were as a transportation route. Kelly watched as the men used large crowbars to pry the iron rails from the wooden ties. Clang, rip, thud. It was a visceral sound. It felt like they were pulling the veins out of the city's arm. The foreman looked at Kelly. "Sorry, Pop, end of the line." "You're taking the road," Kelly said. "Nobody uses it anyway. You guys are stranded now, you know that? If you stay, you walk out." "I'm not going anywhere," Kelly replied. By sunset, the tracks were gone. All that remained was the raised berm of earth where they had laid. It looked like a scar across the desert floor. The umbilical cord was cut. Rhyolite was no longer connected to the 20th century. It was an island, adrift in time. That night, the silence was deeper than ever. There would be no more whistles, no more mail, no more connection. Kelly sat in his glass house and felt the isolation wrap around him like a heavy blanket. He was truly the king of his own domain now, a domain that no one could reach. Time in a ghost town does not move in hours or minutes. It moves in seasons of decay. 1918, 1919, 1920. The years blurred together. The town began to change shape. The wooden buildings went first. Without maintenance, the dry desert air sucked the moisture from the timber. The nails loosened. The roofs sagged. One by one, the saloons and the shops collapsed into piles of splintered gray lumber. The stone buildings, however, died a slower death. The John S. Cook Bank, the fortress of finance, began to lose its dignity. The plaster crumbled from the walls, revealing the brick beneath. The coyotes, emboldened by the lack of humans, moved their dens into the basement. Kelly would often walk through the town on his morning patrol. He saw nature reclaiming its territory. A cactus was growing in the middle of the opera house floor. A hawk had built a nest in the chandelier of the hotel. He stopped at the bank. The vault door was still open, rusting in the fixed position. He walked inside. The floor was covered in a foot of sand. "Hello?" he called out. His voice echoed. "Hello, hello, hello." Only the ghosts answered. He felt a strange affection for these ruins. They were his companions. He watched them age as one watches a friend grow old. He knew every crack in the stucco, every missing shingle. He was the curator of a museum with no visitors. In 1921, Mr. Sims didn't show up for the Sunday card game. Kelly and Lorraine walked to the small shack where Sims lived on the edge of the red light district. They found him in his bed. He had passed away in his sleep, holding a photograph of a woman neither of them knew. They buried him in the town cemetery, next to the miners who had died in the boom years. It was a simple service. There was no priest. Lorraine read a passage from a tattered Bible he kept. Kelly carved a wooden cross. "He was the last postmaster," Kelly said, patting the dirt down with his shovel. "Now there's nobody left to sort the mail." Lorraine looked at the grave, then at the horizon. "I'm leaving, Tom." Kelly looked up. "Leaving?" "I'm too old to die here alone. My daughter in Oregon, she wrote to me years ago. I'm gonna walk to Beatty and catch a ride. You should come. Kelly shook his head. No, my house is here. You're a stubborn mule, Lorraine said, his eyes wet. You're gonna turn into stone like the rest of this place. The next day, Lorraine left. Kelly watched his figure shrink into a dot on the horizon until the heat haze swallowed him. Now there was only one. He stopped at the bank. The vault door was still open, rusting in the fixed position. He walked inside. The floor was covered in a foot of sand. "Hello?" he called out. His voice echoed. "Hello, hello, hello." Only the ghosts answered. He felt a strange affection for these ruins. They were his companions. He watched them age as one watches a friend grow old. He knew every crack in the stucco, every missing shingle. He was the curator of a museum with no visitors. In 1921, Mr. Sims didn't show up for the Sunday card game. Kelly and Lorraine walked to the small shack where Sims lived, on the edge of the red light district. They found him in his bed. He had passed away in his sleep, holding a photograph of a woman neither of them knew. They buried him in the town cemetery, next to the miners who had died in the boom years. It was a simple service. There was no priest. Lorraine read a passage from a tattered Bible he kept. Kelly carved a wooden cross. He was the last postmaster, Kelly said, patting the dirt down with his shovel. Now there's nobody left to sort the mail. Lorraine looked at the grave, then at the horizon. "I'm leaving, Tom." Kelly looked up. "Leaving? I'm too old to die here alone. My daughter in Oregon, she wrote to me years ago. I'm gonna walk to Beatty and catch a ride. You should come." Kelly shook his head. "No, my house is here." "You're a stubborn mule," Lorraine said, his eyes wet. "You're gonna turn into stone like the rest of this place." The next day, Lorraine left. Kelly watched his figure shrink into a dot on the horizon until the heat haze swallowed him. Now there was only one. To be the last man in a dead city is a unique existence. Kelly became a monk of the desert. His routine was sacred. He woke with the sun. He tended his small garden, which he watered with gray water from his washing. He repaired the mud mortar of his bottle house. He spoke to himself. Then he spoke to the house. "Wind's coming from the north today," he would tell the glass walls. "Might be a storm." The bottles would hum in response. He began to see things, not hallucinations, but memories superimposed on reality. When he looked at the empty street, he saw the parade of July 4th, 1906. He heard the brass band. He saw the girls in their white dresses. When he looked at the crumbling stock exchange, he heard the shouting of the brokers. The past was more real to him than the present. He was living in two worlds simultaneously. One, a car drove into town. It was a Ford Model T, dusty and rattling. A man and a woman stepped out. They were tourists, sightseers. They looked at the ruins with wide eyes, pointing and laughing. They took photographs with a box camera. They saw Kelly sitting on his porch. They approached him cautiously, as if he were a wild animal or a ghost himself. "Excuse me, sir," the man asked. "Is this Rhyolite?" "It is," Kelly said, not rising. "We heard about the ghost town. We wanted to see the ruins." "Ruins?" Kelly tasted the word. "Is that what you call them?" "Well, nobody lives here, right?" Kelly looked at them. He realized that to them he wasn't a resident. He was an artifact. He was part of the attraction. "I live here," Kelly said with dignity, "and the house lives here." He invited them inside. He showed them the walls made of 50,000 bottles. He told them the story, not the tragedy, but the triumph. He told them about the ice, the opera, the gold. When they left, they pressed a $5 bill into his hand. "For your trouble," the man said. Watched them drive away. He looked at the money. Rhyolite had shifted again. It was no longer a mining town. It was a story, and he was the storyteller. By 1924, Tom Kelly was very old. His movements were slow. The walk to the town center took him an hour. He spent most of his time on the porch. He knew his time was coming. The desert does not mourn. It simply waits. He looked at his house. The mud was cracking in places, but the glass was as strong as ever. The beer bottles, the medicine bottles, the whiskey bottles, they still held the light. "You'll stay," he whispered to the house. "You're too stubborn to fall." He thought about Elias Thorne. He thought about the frantic days of the panic. He thought about the train carrying the houses away. He realized he had won. The bankers who chased the gold were gone. The miners who chased the wages were gone. But he, the mason who built with trash, was still here. He had found a different kind of treasure. He had found the peace of the end. One morning, he didn't wake up to tend the garden. A few days later, a prospector passing through found him. He was in his bed, peaceful, surrounded by the amber glow of the morning sun filtering through the glass walls. They buried him near the others, but they didn't tear down his house. Paramount Pictures came a few months later. They used the town as a set for a movie. They patched up the bottle house. Tourists started coming in larger numbers. They carved their names on the wood. They stole bricks as souvenirs. But they didn't tear down his house. Paramount Pictures came a few months later. They used the town as a set for a movie. They patched up the bottle house. Tourists started coming in larger numbers. They carved their names on the wood. They stole bricks as souvenirs. But when the sun went down and the tourists drove back to Beatty, the silence returned. The wind blew through the empty bank. The coyotes sang to the moon, and the bottle house stood there, glowing in the starlight. The guardian was gone, but his monument remained. The city of stone had crumbled, but the house of glass held its ground, a fragile, beautiful defiance against the erasing hand of time. The desert took back Rhyolite, but it could not digest the glass. Decades passed. The roof of the Cook Bank finally collapsed in a thunder of dust that no one heard. The Overbury building lost its third floor to a winter storm. But the bottle house remained. It became the symbol, not of the gold, but of the human spirit. The gold was the lie. The glass was the truth. The last resident had left, but he left the door open for us. The guardians are gone, leaving the ruins to the silence of the desert. Please like and subscribe to keep these memories alive, and sleep well. The last guardians have faded into the dust, leaving the city to the silence of the desert. Join us next time as we walk these streets today to explore the ghostly skeletons that still refuse to fall.